everybody. This is Hassan Habib. I'm going to talk to you today about the entity framework and how can you create a model with your code, following a paradigm code first, and then convert that into a database. You can also do it the other way around, and I'll show you how. So let's start a new project in here. You're going to be using the Entity Framework 6. You probably want to be aware that we're going to be communicating with your local database, and probably in future videos I'll show you in more detail about the Entity Framework and how to deal with it. So let's start a new project in here. Let's call our project Entity Framework Demo, Entity Framework 6 Demo. Let's start that. So of course up front I assume that you will have some understanding about what a database is, and you have some basic understanding of C#, like defining classes, putting properties and stuff like that, because right now what happens with technology is, you learn one thing, one layer of information, of knowledge, and then more knowledge is going to come in, and it's going to be very dependent on what you know in the past. So if you don't know C#, if you don't know Microsoft SQL Server, of course you're welcome to watch this video, but you need to look at these things. I'd recommend you to go to Microsoft Virtual Academy and read some books from Free Computer Books or Amazon.com to understand what Visual C# is and what a database is. So let's start from here. For those of you who understand C# and the .NET framework in general and some database, let's start and create a model. This is a new paradigm. Most people just call it classes. It's just a new name for it. So let's create a model. Let's call our model student. So I'm calling my model student. So this is a class. Let's put some stuff in that class. So let's say, what could our student need? Let's say ID. So that's the ID number for that student. Let's give the student a name. So let's say, oh, by the way, some programmers, throw a fit and have a cow. When you write string that way, they say write it with lower letter, something like this. But I really don't care. I care more about how my code looks more consistent. So if your data types are going to look like that, so just move on. So you have good and green with capital letters, so move on this way. So alright, so we have the name, student name, okay, and let's put something else to these properties. So let's say property, grade, and we don't have a grade data type, and I'll show you how the Entity Framework is going to deal with that. So let's say grade. So let's create an enumeration here. This enumeration is basically a specific set of possible values that you may give to an object at a point in time. So let's say we have an enumeration here. Let's call it grade, and this grade is going to be, let's say, kindergarten, junior high, whatever, high school, probably college, stuff like that. Alright, so we have these things, we have these values, and of course, you can actually write the whole thing. It's up to you. It's for your convenience. It's up to you, really. And you know that if you understand C#, you know that these enumerations have numeric values. It's actually from the name. It's an enumeration. You can enumerate using numbers as an index, but you get a different value. It's like a list, but in a different fashion. So alright, we have our model in here. What do we do to have this model being translated into a database? So we don't want to go build tables. We don't want to do relational database analysis. We don't want to do normalization, denormalization. We don't want to do any of that. We just want to write code and want our code to go talk to the database. So what we're going to do is, let's go to our project here and let's go and add a NuGet package. And what I'm going to add here is the entity framework. Let's add this the right way. So I'm going to go to the project. I'm going to go manage NuGet packages, and I'm going to just look for entity framework. All right, there it is. So you're looking for the entity framework. What's going to happen, this is not a plugin for your Visual Studio, because some people may think that. This is not a plugin for your Visual Studio. This is a chunk of libraries that are going to be dumped into your project references in order for you to utilize them and reuse the code in them. So what you really need to do is just you're going to click install, click accept. You know, it's going to load all these things. So it loaded the entity framework, dynamic link library, entity framework, SQL server. That's pretty much, and of course system.component model, data annotations. And this is one of the coolest features. I'll show you how you can actually control how your database gets created and how you can control what data type to be put in there. All right, so you have the libraries, you have the model. What else is missing to generate a database? Let's go ahead and add the missing link between your code and the database, which is the context. So let's go here and let's put a database context. Let's call it student DB context. And you know, you can call it whatever you want, but you have to have some love, let's say love, for your colleagues at work or whatever open source project. Write things that are readable and understandable for other people. Don't go and do something like this. Oh, property, I'm going to write something integer. It's going to be MXLZ. What is that? Nobody knows what that is. But when you go ahead and write something that makes sense, of course, people will appreciate your coding style, and it will help you. So, okay, we created the database context. What we want to do here, this is going to be the link between the database, your database server, because you didn't create the database yet. So it's going to be the link between your database server and your code. So this guy is going to inherit something called let me call the namespace first. So it's system.data.entity. Here's our namespace, and it's going to inherit. What's it going to inherit? It's going to inherit database context. So this is a main class that has all. You can override the methods that are in there, but what this database context basically does is that it takes your code and generates a database, right? It turns it into SQL code, SQL query that actually creates, drops tables, create other tables, all kind of things, and you will see some external table right next to the database that got created for you. It's called the migration, and you know, in further videos, I'm going to show you exactly what these migrations do. I'm going to show you. I'm going to talk to you all about it and how you can create a model that actually talks to a WCF service, but at the same time serves your database. These things are so important, and why this choice is better than generating a class from the database instead of actually writing code and having this code turned into a database table. So we inherited the database context. What are we going to do next? Let's create a database set. The database set is basically a collection that the database context class understands, and it extracts and creates a table out of it. So our database set is going to take a type student, which is what we created. That's the model. And let's call it something understandable to human beings. So, I mean, anyone can write a code that a machine can understand, but only good programmers can write code that humans can understand. So let's call it students. So that's a very convenient name because we want to add to the students collection. We want to grab from the students collection. We want to remove from students collections. So it's very convenient to call it students or students list or students collection, but don't go and say S or STD, because STD can be standard, can be student, can be anything. So be more, flexible with the naming. We have a lot of memories. Don't worry about that. Okay, all right. So we have this link. This guy is going to be our main guy who will actually convert this model into a database, and I'll show you how. We have our SQL server in here. This is our object browser, and we have this is our Big G SQL Express. Big G is my machine name, and it is big, and it doesn't have any databases in it. So let's see what happens here, other than the system database, of course, which is none of our business right now. Let's go to our program and test our stuff in here. So let's see what happens. So I'm going to define a student. Let's call it student. And let's say, here's our student. Okay, for convenience, some people, it would rather, if you have an ID and it's already a GUID, like a general or universal ID, let's make that being defined in our constructor. So when you do that, let's just say every time someone defines this class in the constructor, go ahead and put a new GUID or ID in the ID property. So I'm just going to go like that. So that would be cleaner, right? And let's make this guy for only to be a read only. So you can't just assign to it. Or actually, we can assign it as a private member. Let's see. We can do something. Actually, I can assign like a private member in here. Let's say GUID, and that private member will be accessible only through the class. Okay, I'm not going to complicate things right now. It's just not worth it. I just want to make it as simple as possible, so you just get the ideas, because I'm not explaining classes right now. I'm just trying to explain how can a class be turned into a database. So we have our program. We created a new student, so a new GUID have been created already. Now what we want to do is that let's put some name to that student. So let's call it John Doe, the infamous John Doe. And then let's put a grade for this guy. So let's give him a grade. Let's say this guy's in college. So it's grade C in college. All right, that makes sense. What do we do next? We have this object, but this object still it's not still living in the database. It's still living in our code, and as soon as the project instance is gone, this object is gone. So we're gonna define a new object from the student database context, which we've already done. Student context, and the initialization here actually initializes. It inherits the base class, so you don't have to worry about that. But what you need to do is that you call this object and then find students, student context, students, there it is. And then we're just going to add the student that we already created to it. So let's go here and say student. Now, this collection has your new object. What do we do next? We're just going to save. That's it. And when you click save, student context, save changes. That's it. So now your changes have been saved to the database. Let's see if that's true. So I'm going to run my program in here, and it's done. Of course, we didn't show anything. I'll show you how to show stuff later. Let's go to our SQL server here and refresh this guy and see what happens. Look, it created a database for you. It had the project name, and then it had the student database context, which is the class that you called. Okay, and you can rename that. Don't worry about that. Let's look at the tables. What did it create in the tables? The migration history, which we will talk about fairly through if I had to have more videos, and then you have the students table. Let's see what's in that students table. Let's look at the designer first. How the students table got designed. It had an ID, which is a unique identifier. It's not allowed to be null. And you have the name in varchar, and you have a grade. Some people would say having in varchar as max will eat all the memory. You get to actually control that. You get to control things like what data type you would want. Like I can call system data let's say, what's it called? The annotations component model. So let's go here and say component model data annotations. And I can go here and tell my model to tell the database what database I want, what kind of data type I want to do. So you can go ahead and say data type, and then you can go and say data type. This is a data type. It's going to be var or let's say text. You have all kinds of data types, and let's say text, for example. Okay, and then you get to actually define like what length you want. You actually get to define also what key. Let's say, you know, you have to understand that just for having an ID in here, the database knows that this is your unique identifier. But what if this ID was like serial number? The database doesn't know that, so you're going to have to go and use the database annotation and say this is a key. And that's all it takes. Okay? But that's a discussion for another video. Now we have our database. Let's give the end user some results. First of all, if you want to know what actually changed, this method, save changes, actually returns a number, and that number is how many elements have been changed. So I can go ahead and say integer changes. So now I take back these changes that happened to the database. So I can go console.writeLine. I can go and say number of items affected, and then I'm going to say changes.string, and then I'm going to say items. Some people will tell me, why don't you just use string.concatenate? Hey guys, you're the best. Do it. I won't go there. I won't do that argument right now. So let's see if that actually happens. So now here's our end user. They entered their data, and they want to know if the data actually got to the database. So what's happened is that I'm going to start. It will give me number of items affected, one item. So we added one item before, and now we just added this one item. In this instance, we added one item. I can go ahead and say go to the view data. Here's our data that we added. So we added one before, and this is the new one that we just added with different IDs. So that's it. That's simply it. You created your code, you created your object, you pushed it to the database. The database, you know, you didn't have a table or a database with that definition. Your entity framework, the very cool feature about this, it just saved you the whole trouble. Can you imagine, like, if you have 20 to 30 model or 20 to 30 classes, and you need to make the relationships between these and all that? The entity framework just killed about 90% of the time wasted into designing a database and all that. You just can just do your code and push it to the database. The entity framework will do that for you. Now let's go the other way. I'm going to create a new project in here, and my project does not have a, here's my solution. I'm going to go ahead and say add new project, and I'm going to say entity framework 06. So what we just demonstrated, that was called code first. Now what about the designer? So we have entity framework demo from database. So that's a new project. This project doesn't have what this one had. This project is just empty. It doesn't have anything in it. I'm going to make it my startup project. So when we launch it, we know what we're doing. Now, okay, this guy has a problem, which is that you don't have these classes. You don't have this code, but you actually have the database. So you want to pull all that from the database, and it will write the code for you. So let's see how that works. We're going to go here. We're going to add a new item, and I'm going to go to data. You have addo.net entity data model, and let's say student model, like that. And let's go, and we're going to select entity framework designer from database. I'm going to click next. I want to connect to that database. So let's see, what's my database called? It's called It's called here, let's see, new connection, big G slash SQL Express. All right, let's see if that works. Yep. So I have my database that have been generated before, so I'm going to choose that. And then let's call it here Save Connection Settings and App Config as Student Entities. Please, if you're learning programming, be very careful when you're using names, because if your project gets inherited, it's up to you to decide whether the developers who are going to see your project in the future will praise you or pray from your code. It's up to you. So we're going to use Entity Framework 6, and then we're going to go next. All right, so it generated, it went to the database, and it's showing us all the tables in here. We have the students. I don't need the migration history. I just need the students. So it automatically will say Student Database Context Model. I'm going to click Finish, and it will go ahead and generate that for me. Okay. All right, so see what happened here. This model generated, got generated from the database, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking at the student model. If you go to the student, see, it generated that code for you. And it says here, this code was generated from a template, and you would be asking me, all right, in this program, we don't have a database context. No, we do. Actually, in the same model, you see student model context, and that's it. That's how it is. So it created it the same way, except that it put virtual for other reasons. So let's say if that actually works. So let's go to our program here. Let's define a student equals new student. Here's the bad part, and this is what I was talking about. Now you don't get to have, you're going to have to go here and actually create a constructor which will make this statement irrelevant. And as soon as you update your model, all your changes are gone. So I can't just go here and say public student and create a GUID.new GUID like this. That's cool. Now as soon as you go here and say update from the database for any changes like this for your tables, finish. Let's see how your code looks like right now. Let's see. If I get to just move the folder, let's say my model folder, and I got this guy moved in here, you lose all your changes because it recreates. Look, yes to all. If you go to a student, it's gone. One person might say, well, why would I do that? So, as soon as your project starts to move around, you will have this issue. So let's go back to our program here to test what we're trying to do. So let me get that guy out to where it was. Let's delete that guy. Okay, I have my student in here. Let's go ahead and, unfortunately, you're going to have to put an ID, GUID.new GUID, student.name. Let's call it John Doe. And then let's go student and say class. Grade. See what happens here. Your grade is being translated as an integer, and your enumeration is gone. If you go here, you don't know. Just put 8. You don't know. And you don't know if the value is right or wrong. That's why I'm saying code first is always way better than just pulling data from the database, because you don't know. You don't have that you don't have that power. And if you do, it's going to take you a way longer term to do that. It would rather just to go code first, and it will save the day for you. And if you want to go to a different route, to a different database, you should check out how you change the link to your database. So that's the problem here. That's another problem. But we're testing how this is going to work. So I'm going to go and say student entities equal to entities, like this. And then in the entities we have a generated list for us. I'm just going to add the student to it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save that. Save changes, like that. And as I did on the first one, I'm just going to go ahead and say console right line, and I already know this guy returns an integer, so I'm just going to say, before the guy starts barking at me and telling me that I can't throw an integer in the console.write line, and then I'm just going to say console.read. So let's run this guy and see if it really works. It works. So that's 1 in here. If you go to the database, you can see 3 records, and that's because refresh, that's 3 records. So that's 8. And 8 is out of your, could be out of your enumeration. This is why code first is better. It's way better. And if you're creating a website, if you're creating a quick, application, it would be way better to actually just use code first. But of course, every one of these have its own usage. It's probably some people just use primitive types, which is completely understandable. What else did I want to show you here? I want to show you how we can pull data real quick before I finish up this video. So let's go and find an ID in here from this database. Let's get that ID. Or actually, I'm just going to look by grade. So you're just going to use a link statement, just a normal link statement. So you're going to say where student equals, and his grade is 8 first. Some people use single, which is completely dangerous, and I'll show you why. Using single means that you already assume that because we're using student already, so let's just make it student. Let's make it student item, and let's make it here student item, I guess. So some people go ahead and say, yeah, you don't have really to use where and first. Why don't you just use single? And the problem with that is that if you use single, you already are assuming that you have only 1 record in that collection. What if you have 2? What if you have 3? It depends really on how you pursue your problems. So right, I'm looking for a user that has grade 8, and I want to get the information. So I'm just going to define a quick object in here to get retrieved. Let's say retrieved student. Let's do it this way. Retrieve student. And let's get the information of this guy. So let's say console.read line, write line, student name. I know how to type. Plus retrieved student.name. There's one guy. And console.write line student ID, the student ID, the only student ID is so, or one of them in grade which has so let's say retrieve student dot ID and console.write line. Of course, we know that piece of information, but we're just going to put it in there for convenience. Grade is going to be retrieved student dot grade dot toString, of course, because it's an integer. And all right, so now I'm retrieving, so I don't need this data. I don't need this guy. I'm pulling this data. I'm just going to read console.read. There you go. Start. Boom. So you got the student ID, student name, student grade, and this is how you actually pull, go back and forth, you know, pull information, you know, do all kinds of stuff. We can also update this guy. So we have this retrieve student. Let's use this chance and say entities.entry. I'm gonna push that guy that I just pulled. So retrieve student dot state. And I'm gonna say I'm gonna update this guy so it got modified. Okay, and that student, I'm gonna do something to it. So I'm gonna change its name. I'm gonna say the retrieve student dot name is actually John Connor, for example. And let's just save. So entities dot save changes, and then I'm gonna say after update. So let's just take these guys and print again the very same information and see if that really gonna work. So at the beginning here, the retrieved student was it's an updated student. Let's do it this way. So at the beginning, the student name was John Doe, but now it's going to be John Connor. So let's see if that really works. So we updated the guy. We said it's modified. We saved our changes, but you have to indicate the state of what happened. And then we pull that guy again with grade 8 from the database, and let's see what happens now. Click. There. So at the beginning was John Doe, ID blah blah blah, grade 8. After we updated it, it became John Connor, ID blah blah blah, and grade 8. If we go to the database and we view the data and refresh, it's John Connor. So that's the update. So now you can add and now you can update. What about deletion? And you can retrieve, of course, because we retrieve. The last thing in the CRUD, in the professional environment, some people call it CRUD, which is create, retrieve, update, delete. You know, the 4 basic operations that you run on a database. So let's delete John Doe. Or John Connor now. So I'm gonna go and say entities dot students. I'm gonna say student deleted student equals entities dot students dot where. I'm gonna find this guy again. Or you know what? I'm not gonna find this guy again. I'm just gonna go and say entities dot students dot remove. I'm just gonna shoot this guy at it. So I remove this guy, and now I'm gonna say entities dot entry. So I need to now I'm gonna say updated student dot state, and then I'm gonna say delete it. And because there is no data to retrieve, I'm just gonna go ahead and say integer changes equal entities dot save changes, and then console that out. let's say if changes is bigger than 0, then console write line, and then say John Connor is gone. So we deleted John Connor, and then read. So that will be a conditional piece. So let's go ahead and try to do that. So okay, let's do that. John Connor is gone. If we go to the database and refresh, John Connor is gone. So yeah, that's about it. So that's the entity framework, really quick. You know, CRUD, you can retrieve, you can update, you can go from code to database or from database to code. Let me know if you have any questions. You can always open a book and read, or just find, you know, there are way better videos on YouTube. This is just a kickstart so you would understand what entity framework is. And when someone is talking about entity framework, this is the simplest way to explain it from my perspective. Thank you for watching and have a beautiful day.